The morning sun was just beginning to rise over Fort Campbell in Kentucky when Sergeant Maya Rodriguez stepped onto the training field. At 32 years old, she had served her country for 12 years with honor and dedication. Her uniform was crisp, her boots polished to perfection, and her dark hair pulled back in a tight regulation bun. Maya had seen combat in 2 overseas deployments. She had earned 3 commendations for bravery and had saved 2 fellow soldiers during an ambush in her last tour. But none of that seemed to matter to Staff Sergeant Derek Hammond, the new hand-to-hand combat instructor who had transferred to the base just 2 weeks earlier. Hammond was a large man, standing 6'3" with broad shoulders and a permanent scowl etched into his face. He had a reputation that preceded him. Other instructors whispered about his aggressive training methods and his particular dislike for female soldiers. Maya had heard the rumors, but she believed in giving everyone a fair chance. The training session began like any other. 40 soldiers stood in formation, waiting for instructions. Hammond paced in front of them, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Listen up," he barked. "Today we're going to separate the real soldiers from the pretenders. Hand-to-hand combat is not for the weak. It's not for people who think they deserve special treatment." His eyes landed on Maya and the 3 other women in the formation. The meaning was clear. "Rodriguez," he called out, "front and center." Maya stepped forward without hesitation. She had been through worse than an instructor with an attitude problem. She stood at attention, her eyes focused straight ahead. "You think you can handle real combat training?" Hammond asked, circling her like a predator. "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Maya responded firmly. "We'll see about that," he sneered. "Everyone partner up. Rodriguez, you're with me." The other soldiers exchanged worried glances. It was unusual for an instructor to partner directly with a trainee for combat drills, especially on the first day of a new training cycle. Hammond led Maya to the center of the mat. "We're going to demonstrate proper defensive techniques," he announced to the group. "Pay attention. This is how you respond when someone comes at you." But as the drill began, it became clear this was not a standard demonstration. Hammond's movements were too fast, too aggressive. He was not giving Maya time to respond properly or showing the technique slowly for the benefit of the watching soldiers. Maya blocked and deflected as best she could, but Hammond was not holding back. The other soldiers grew quiet, sensing something was wrong. This was not training. This was something else. "Come on, Rodriguez," Hammond taunted loudly. "Is this the best you can do? And they let you serve overseas. You probably hid while the real soldiers did the fighting." Maya's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. She had faced enemy fire. She had carried a wounded soldier through hostile territory. She would not let this man's words break her focus. But Hammond was just getting started. He increased the intensity, throwing strikes that were meant to connect, not to teach. Maya dodged and blocked, her training kicking in automatically. "What's wrong?" Hammond called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Need a break. Need to call mommy. This is why women don't belong in combat roles. You're a liability to every real soldier around you." The watching soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Several of them had served with Maya. They knew her record. They knew her courage. This was wrong, and they all felt it. Maya said nothing. She continued the drill, refusing to give Hammond the satisfaction of a response. But inside, anger was building. Not at the words. She had heard worse from actual enemies, but at the injustice of it. She had earned her place here. She had bled for her country. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, none of them knew that this day would be different from all others. None of them knew that Hammond had made a choice that would end his career. And none of them knew that 4 senior officers were, at that very moment, making their way to the training field. The demonstration was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. Part 2: The Strike. The drill continued for another 10 minutes. Hammond's aggression only increased as time went on. He was showing off now, demonstrating his physical dominance, making it clear that he believed Maya did not belong there. Maya's arms were beginning to ache from the constant blocking. Sweat dripped down her back despite the cool morning air, but she refused to ask for a break. She refused to give Hammond what he wanted. "All right, Rodriguez," Hammond said, breathing hard. "Let's try something different. I'm going to come at you full speed. Defend yourself like this is real combat." This was against protocol. Training demonstrations were supposed to be controlled, especially with such a size and strength difference. Several soldiers in formation exchanged concerned looks. "Staff Sergeant," Maya began, "shouldn't we?" "Did I ask for your opinion, Sergeant?" Hammond cut her off. "Are you refusing to follow orders?" It was a trap, and Maya knew it. If she refused, he would write her up for insubordination. If she agreed, she was accepting an unsafe training scenario. But Maya had faced worse choices in combat zones. She would not back down. "No, Staff Sergeant," she replied. "I'll follow your orders." "Good," Hammond said with a cold smile. "Finally learning your place." He moved back several paces, preparing for his approach. The watching soldiers held their breath. This was wrong. Everyone on that field knew it was wrong. Hammond charged forward with full force. Maya set her stance, ready to deflect and redirect his momentum as she had been trained to do. But at the last second, Hammond changed his angle. Instead of coming straight at her, he shifted to the side. Maya adjusted, but Hammond was faster than she expected. His hand shot out, not in a training strike, but in a real blow. His palm connected with the side of Maya's face with a sharp crack that echoed across the field. The force of it sent Maya stumbling backward. She caught herself before falling, but the damage was done. Her cheek was already beginning to swell, and she could taste blood in her mouth. The entire training field went silent. 40 soldiers stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. An instructor had struck a soldier, not in a controlled demonstration, not in a proper training technique, but in actual violence. Hammond stood there, his chest heaving, a look of satisfaction on his face. "That's what real combat looks like, Rodriguez. Maybe now you'll understand that you're not cut out for this." Maya straightened slowly. Her face throbbed with pain, but her eyes were clear and focused. She did not touch her injured cheek. She did not cry out. She simply stood at attention and looked Hammond directly in the eye. "Is that all, Staff Sergeant?" she asked, her voice steady despite the pain. For just a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across Hammond's face. He had expected her to break, to cry, to give him a reason to throw her out of the training program. But Maya Rodriguez had been through actual war. A bully in an instructor's uniform was not going to break her. "Fall back in formation," Hammond snapped, turning away from her. Maya returned to her position, her face already starting to bruise. The soldier next to her, a young corporal named Jensen, whispered, "Sergeant Rodriguez, are you okay?" That was. "Eyes forward, Corporal," Maya said quietly. She would not put Jensen at risk by allowing him to speak against an instructor, even one who was clearly in the wrong. But what none of them saw was Private First Class Mitchell, standing at the back of the formation. Mitchell had his phone in his pocket, and he had recorded everything. The entire incident, from Hammond's taunts to the strike that should never have happened. And what none of them knew was that, at that exact moment, a car was pulling up to the training field administrative building. Inside were 4 full colonels, making an unannounced inspection visit to observe training procedures. Colonel Sarah Brennan stepped out of the car first. She was the base commander, a woman who had fought her way up through the ranks in a time when it was even harder for women in the military. She had come today specifically to observe the new hand-to-hand combat program. With her were 3 other colonels: Colonel Marcus Webb, the head of personnel, Colonel James Patterson, who oversaw training operations, and Colonel David Chen, the base inspector general. They had arrived to observe standard training. Instead, They were about to walk into a situation that would shake the entire base. Private Mitchell made a decision in that moment. He broke formation and ran toward the administrative building, phone in hand. He knew this could cost him, but he also knew that what had just happened could not stand. Justice was about to arrive on the training field, and Staff Sergeant Derek Hammond's career was about to end. Private Mitchell's heart pounded as he ran toward the administrative building. Breaking formation without permission was a serious offense, but he could not stand by and let what had happened go unreported. He had served under Sergeant Rodriguez during training exercises before. She had always been fair, knowledgeable, and brave. What Hammond had done was not just wrong, it was criminal. As he approached the building, he nearly collided with the four colonels who were just stepping outside. "Private, what is the meaning of this?" Colonel Webb demanded. "Why are you out of formation?" Mitchell came to an abrupt halt and saluted, trying to catch his breath. "Sir, I need to report an incident on the training field. An instructor just struck a soldier during a drill." The four colonels exchanged glances. Colonel Brennan stepped forward. She was a woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Struck a soldier," she repeated. "Explain yourself, Private, and make it quick." "Staff Sergeant Hammond, ma'am, the new hand-to-hand combat instructor. He was demonstrating with Sergeant Maya Rodriguez and he hit her. Really hit her, not a training technique. I have it on video, ma'am." Colonel Brennan's expression hardened. "Show me." Mitchell pulled out his phone with shaking hands and played the video. The four colonels watched in silence. They could see Hammond's taunts, his aggressive behavior, and finally, the moment when his hand connected with Maya's face. Colonel Chen, the Inspector General, spoke first. "That is assault. That is conduct unbecoming. That is grounds for court-martial." "That is the end of that man's career," Colonel Brennan said coldly. "Gentlemen, we're going to the training field. Now." The four colonels walked with purpose across the base, with Private Mitchell following behind. On the training field, the session had continued, though the atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. Hammond was demonstrating another technique with a male soldier, acting as if nothing had happened. Maya stood in formation, her cheek now visibly swollen and darkening into a bruise. She maintained her military bearing, but several soldiers near her could see the pain in her eyes, not from the physical injury, but from the injustice of it all. Hammond's voice carried across the field. "This is how real soldiers train. This is what separates the warriors from the weak. Some people just can't handle the pressure of real military training." He glanced at Maya as he said this, making sure everyone understood who he meant. That was when the four colonels arrived at the edge of the training field. Colonel Brennan's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. "Staff Sergeant Hammond." The entire field froze. Every soldier immediately recognized the rank insignias on the approaching officers. Four full colonels walking together meant something serious was happening. Hammond turned, and for the first time that morning, uncertainty crossed his face. He quickly called the formation to attention and saluted. "Good morning, colonels. We're conducting hand-to-hand combat training." "At ease, soldiers," Colonel Brennan commanded. The formation relaxed slightly, but everyone remained standing, sensing the tension in the air. Colonel Brennan walked directly to Hammond, her eyes locked on his. "Staff Sergeant, is Sergeant Maya Rodriguez present?" "Yes, ma'am," Hammond replied, confusion evident in his voice. "Have her step forward." Maya stepped out of formation and approached, saluting the colonels. This close, they could see the injury to her face clearly. The bruise was already turning purple, and there was a small cut where Hammond's hand had connected. Colonel Brennan's jaw tightened. "Sergeant Rodriguez, how did you receive that injury?" Maya hesitated. She had been raised to respect the chain of command, to not cause trouble, but she had also sworn an oath to honor and integrity. Before she could answer, Hammond spoke up. "Ma'am, Sergeant Rodriguez was injured during a training demonstration. It was an accident during a defensive drill. An accident, Colonel Brennan repeated flatly. She turned to Maya. Sergeant, I'm asking you directly, how did this happen? Maya stood straight, her voice clear and steady. Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Hammond struck me during a demonstration. It was not a controlled training technique. The other soldiers held their breath. Maya had just directly contradicted a superior officer, but she had also told the truth. Hammond's face reddened. That's insubordinate. She's lying to cover her own inability to. Private Mitchell, Colonel Brennan interrupted. Please show Staff Sergeant Hammond the video you showed us. The blood drained from Hammond's face. He had not known anyone was recording. In the age of smartphones, he should have known better, but arrogance had made him careless. Mitchell stepped forward and played the video again. This time, 40 soldiers watched as their instructor's misconduct was displayed for everyone to see. The taunts, the aggression, and finally, the strike that should never have happened. When the video ended, Colonel Patterson spoke. Staff Sergeant Derek Hammond, you are hereby relieved of duty pending a full investigation and likely court-martial. You will surrender your training privileges immediately. Colonel Chen stepped forward. You are confined to quarters until a formal hearing can be arranged. Military police are being summoned as we speak. Hammond looked around desperately, as if searching for support, but every soldier on that field had seen what he had done. Several had served with Maya and knew her worth. Others simply knew right from wrong. This is ridiculous, Hammond protested. She's a... Choose your next words very carefully, Staff Sergeant, Colonel Brennan warned, her voice deadly quiet. You are already facing assault charges. Do not add to your list of offenses. Hammond closed his mouth, his career crumbling around him in real time. Colonel Brennan turned to Maya. Sergeant Rodriguez, you will report to the medical facility immediately to have that injury documented and treated. You will then report to my office to make a formal statement. Yes, ma'am, Maya replied. As military police vehicles approached in the distance, the soldiers of Fort Campbell witnessed something important. They saw that justice could prevail, that abuse of power would not be tolerated, and that a brave woman's dignity was worth defending. The medical facility was quiet when Maya arrived. A young nurse practitioner named Lieutenant Sarah Kim took one look at Maya's face and immediately ushered her into an examination room. Sergeant Rodriguez, Lieutenant Kim said gently, I need to document this injury thoroughly. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Maya recounted the morning's events while Lieutenant Kim carefully photographed the bruising and examined her for other injuries. The impact had been severe enough to cause significant swelling and a minor cut inside Maya's mouth. You're going to have quite a bruise for a while, Lieutenant Kim said. But there's no fracture, thankfully. I'm going to prescribe some anti-inflammatory medication for the swelling. Thank you, Lieutenant, Maya said quietly. As Lieutenant Kim worked, she spoke in a low voice. I'm glad you reported this, Sergeant. Between you and me, you're not the first person to complain about Staff Sergeant Hammond's behavior, but you're the first one with video evidence. Maya looked up sharply. There were others. Lieutenant Kim nodded. 2 female soldiers from his previous posting filed complaints about his treatment during training. The complaints were investigated, but without concrete evidence, nothing came of it. He was transferred here as a compromise. Anger flared in Maya's chest. Hammond had done this before, and the system had simply moved him to a new location. How many other soldiers had he hurt or humiliated? After her medical examination, Maya made her way to Colonel Brennan's office. The base commander's secretary directed her to wait in a small conference room. A few minutes later, all 4 colonels entered, along with a captain from the Judge Advocate General's office, the military's legal department. Colonel Brennan sat across from Maya. Her expression was serious but not unkind. Sergeant Rodriguez, I want to begin by apologizing on behalf of this base and this command. What happened to you today should never have occurred. Staff Sergeant Hammond's behavior was unacceptable and illegal. Thank you, ma'am, Maya said. I need you to understand something, Colonel Brennan continued. This investigation is going to be thorough. Hammond will face a court-martial for assault, but we also need to understand how this situation was allowed to develop. How did someone with complaints in his file get assigned as an instructor here? Colonel Webb spoke up. I've been reviewing his personnel file this afternoon. The complaints from his previous posting were noted, but they were classified as personality conflicts rather than abuse. The officer who made that determination has since retired, but it's clear that the situation was mishandled. We're implementing new protocols, Colonel Chen added. All complaints about instructor conduct will now be reviewed by the Inspector General's office, not just by the chain of command. And we're instituting mandatory video recording of all hand-to-hand combat training sessions. Maya listened, but part of her wondered if these changes would have come if Private Mitchell hadn't recorded the incident. How many more soldiers would Hammond have hurt if there had been no evidence? Sergeant Rodriguez, Colonel Brennan said, drawing Maya's attention back. I've been reading your service record. 2 deployments, 3 commendations for bravery, expert marksman qualification. You saved 2 soldiers during an ambush in your last deployment. I was just doing my job, ma'am, Maya said. You were doing more than your job, Colonel Brennan replied. You were being a leader, and today, even after being assaulted, you maintained your composure and your dignity. That takes strength. The JAG captain leaned forward. Sergeant, you should know that in addition to the criminal proceedings against Staff Sergeant Hammond, you have the option to pursue other remedies. The base takes these matters seriously. Maya shook her head. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else, sir. That's all. Colonel Brennan smiled slightly. You remind me of myself at your age, Sergeant, always thinking of others before yourself. She paused. I have a proposition for you. We need good instructors, real leaders who understand that strength isn't about dominating others but about building them up. Have you ever considered becoming an instructor yourself? Maya was surprised. She had never thought about teaching. I'm not sure I'm qualified, ma'am. You're more qualified than you think, Colonel Patterson interjected. You have combat experience, technical expertise, and most importantly, you have integrity. We need more instructors like that. Think about it, Colonel Brennan said. No pressure, but the opportunity is there if you want it. Over the next few days, the story of what happened on the training field spread throughout the base. Soldiers who had served with Maya came forward with their own stories of her leadership and bravery. Others who had encountered Hammond shared their experiences of his bullying and aggression. Private Mitchell became an unexpected hero among the enlisted ranks. He had risked his career to do the right thing, and everyone knew it. The 4 colonels made sure he received a commendation for his actions. Maya spent those days thinking about Colonel Brennan's offer. She had always seen herself as a regular soldier, not a leader or a teacher. But maybe that was exactly why she would be good at it. She understood what it was like to be underestimated, to have to fight for respect, to prove yourself again and again. She thought about all the young soldiers who would come after her, men and women who deserved to be trained by people who would build them up, not tear them down. She thought about the responsibility that came with wearing the uniform and the oath she had taken to protect and serve. On the 5th day after the incident, Maya walked back into Colonel Brennan's office. Ma'am, she said, I've been thinking about your offer. If you're still willing, I'd like to become an instructor. I want to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. Colonel Brennan stood and extended her hand. Welcome to the instructor program, Sergeant Rodriguez. Something tells me you're going to change a lot of lives. As Maya shook the colonel's hand, she felt something shift inside her. She had been struck down, but she had not been broken. And now, she would use her experience to make the military better for those who came after her. Outside, the sun was setting over Fort Campbell, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A new chapter was beginning. 3 months had passed since that morning on the training field. Staff Sergeant Derek Hammond had been court-martialed, found guilty of assault and conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer, and dishonorably discharged from the military. He had also been sentenced to 6 months in a military detention facility. The message was clear: abuse would not be tolerated. But the real story was not about Hammond's fall. It was about what came after. Maya Rodriguez stood in front of her first class as an instructor. She had completed the teaching certification program in record time, drawing on her years of experience and her deep understanding of what soldiers needed. The bruise on her face had long since faded, but the memory of that day remained sharp. "Good morning," she said to the 40 soldiers standing in formation before her. "My name is Sergeant Rodriguez, and I'm going to be your hand-to-hand combat instructor for the next 8 weeks. She looked at the faces before her, young men and women from all backgrounds, all with dreams of serving their country. Some looked nervous, others looked confident. A few looked skeptical, especially when they saw a female instructor. "I know what some of you are thinking," Maya continued. "You're wondering if a woman can really teach you combat skills. You're wondering if I've seen real action or if I'm just here because of some diversity quota." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. She had called out exactly what some of them were thinking. "Let me tell you what I've learned," Maya said. "Real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's not about how loud you can yell or how much you can intimidate someone. Real strength is about discipline, technique, and the courage to stand up when it would be easier to back down." She paused, making eye contact with several soldiers. "I've served 2 combat deployments. I've been under enemy fire. I've carried wounded soldiers to safety. And I've also been where you are now, a trainee being judged by my instructors, having to prove myself every single day." Maya began walking along the formation. "Here's what I promise you. I will train you to the highest standard. I will push you to be better than you think you can be, but I will never humiliate you. I will never put you in danger to feed my own ego, and I will always treat you with the respect that you deserve as soldiers of the United States Army." One soldier, a young woman named Private Diaz, raised her hand tentatively. "Sergeant Rodriguez, is it true that you were assaulted by an instructor here?" Maya could have avoided the question. She could have kept her past private. But she had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was tell the truth. "Yes, Private Diaz, that's true. 3 months ago, an instructor struck me during a training drill. It was wrong, it was illegal, and he was held accountable for his actions." The entire formation was listening intently now. "I tell you this not for sympathy, but because I want you to understand something important. The military is not perfect. Sometimes people abuse their power. Sometimes good people are treated unfairly. But the system can work when good people stand up and demand justice." She looked at each of them. "If you ever experience abuse or witness it happening to someone else, you have a duty to report it. That's not being weak. That's being strong. That's being a leader." Over the following weeks, Maya's reputation as an instructor grew. She was tough but fair, demanding but respectful. Her students learned quickly that she would accept nothing less than their best effort, but she would also never ask them to do something she couldn't do herself. During one session, she demonstrated a complex defensive technique against a larger opponent. She called up Corporal Jackson, a 6'4" soldier who outweighed her by 80 pounds. "The technique works because of leverage and timing, not strength," she explained. "Watch carefully." She demonstrated slowly, showing how to redirect an opponent's momentum and use their own force against them. Then she did it again at full speed. Jackson found himself on the mat, looking up in surprise. "That's amazing, Sergeant," he said. genuine admiration in his voice. "That's physics," Maya replied with a slight smile. "In practice, lots and lots of practice." That word of Maya's teaching style spread beyond her immediate classes. Other instructors began adopting her methods. The base implemented the video recording policy for all combat training, and Colonel Brennan established a new oversight committee to review any complaints about instructor conduct. But perhaps the most important change was in the soldiers themselves. Young women who had been afraid to speak up about unfair treatment found their voices. Male soldiers who had witnessed harassment became more willing to report it. A culture of accountability began to replace the old culture of silence. 6 months after becoming an instructor, Maya was called to Colonel Brennan's office again. This time, she entered with confidence rather than uncertainty. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Colonel Brennan said, "please sit down." Maya took a seat, wondering what this meeting was about. "I've been reviewing the feedback from your students," the colonel continued. "Your performance ratings are exceptional. Your students consistently score higher on their final evaluations than students from other instructors. More importantly, the climate in the training battalion has improved significantly since you joined the instructor staff." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm just trying to do my job." "You're doing more than that," Colonel Brennan said. "You're changing the culture, and because of that, I'm recommending you for promotion to staff sergeant. Additionally, I'd like you to take on a new role, lead instructor for the hand-to-hand combat program. You would be responsible for training other instructors in your methods." Maya was speechless. Just 6 months ago, she had been assaulted on a training field, humiliated and hurt. Now she was being given the opportunity to shape how an entire generation of soldiers would be trained. "I don't know what to say, ma'am." "Say yes," Colonel Brennan replied with a smile. "The military needs leaders like you, Sergeant Rodriguez. Leaders who have the strength to be kind, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the wisdom to lift others up rather than tear them down." Maya thought about that morning on the training field. She thought about the pain and the humiliation, but she also thought about Private Mitchell's courage in recording the incident and reporting it. She thought about the 4 colonels who had arrived and delivered justice. She thought about all the young soldiers she had trained and all those she could train in the future. "Yes, ma'am," Maya said firmly. "I accept." As she left Colonel Brennan's office, Maya walked past the training field where it had all happened. A new class was in session, learning the same skills she had been practicing that morning. But the atmosphere was different now. The instructors were professional and respectful. The students were engaged and enthusiastic. Maya paused for a moment, watching them. One of her former students, Private Diaz, was now helping demonstrate a technique. The young woman had blossomed under Maya's instruction, gaining confidence and skill. This was Maya's legacy, not the assault she had suffered, but the change she had created from it. She had taken a moment of injustice and transformed it into a movement for accountability and respect. The sun was setting over Fort Campbell once again, but this time Maya watched it with a sense of peace. She had been tested and had emerged stronger. She had faced injustice and had demanded change. She had been struck down but had risen up to become a leader. And somewhere out there, future soldiers would benefit from her courage, trained by instructors who understood that true strength comes not from dominance, but from integrity, respect, and the unwavering commitment to do what is right. Maya Rodriguez had not just survived her ordeal. She had transformed it into something meaningful, and in doing so, she had made her corner of the military and the world a better place. The story of the instructor who struck her had ended his career. But Maya's story, the story of courage, resilience, and transformation, was just beginning.